Welcome to the Skill Touch Disrupt podcast, where we dive into the world of innovation and technology. My name is Malika, and I'm the founder and CEO of Skill Touch, which is a recruitment company that operates globally, specializing in all things AI and tech. Today, I have with me Korin, who is the team lead talent acquisition at Frontify. She's going to talk to us a bit more about the world of, remote and flexible working and how our working dynamics are changing to this day. So, Corinne, great to have you on here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for the intro as well.
Yeah, pleasure. It would be great to tell our audience a bit more about yourself, your background, and what motivated you to join Frontify.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when graduating college, I think I had a similar experience as to many. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life, and I had a fancy business degree under my belt. So, sales, I think, was a really just
Yeah,
obvious choice. And there were so many opportunities. I had just been looking to move to New York and was looking to get into the startup scene. So, took a sales role. I was the first business development rep at a health tech company at the time and saw some growth in my career, got into an account executive role and was working up that ladder and had a little bit of a revelation where I was like, you know what? I think there's something more out there for me. And my boss at the time also brought an opportunity to me, was like, do you want to try recruiting? And I was like, I've never thought of that before. Recruiting didn't really was never something on my radar, but I think
yeah,
as many know, so many skills are so
that's
similar to what you experience in sales. So got into recruiting as the first recruiter at that company and was in that role for some time before Frontify actually came across my LinkedIn messages, and I'd never heard of it before, but instantly it was just welcomed and excited by the culture, by the product. Everything was just a whole new world for me. I love the creativity behind it too. I think that was really attractive. And also just it's a very globally based team. And I wanted to learn from people with different backgrounds, different perspectives. So that's kind of what interested me in getting over there. And I took on a talent partner role there. So doing recruiting for the US team specifically, then saw some growth in my position over time, took on more senior roles. And then I started in the team lead position. So then I was just managing the team, also doing some recruiting to diversify that position a bit, but also doing a bunch of other projects and operational bits to fill my day. So that's kind of where I'm at career wise.
great. No, lovely story. And yeah, I think it's really common. Like people who get into recruitment, they kind of, I mean, you don't think when you leave school like you're going to go into recruitment. You just end
No.
up falling into it, right?
Yes, I think I don't know what you think, but I feel like it's always just, you think of these very glamorous careers, and I feel like recruiting doesn't always maybe seem as glamorous. But I think what I've learned as well is as much as the job is important, I think a lot of it is the team that you work with and the company and all of those things. If they're aligned to your values, I think that's what ends
Yeah.
up being a lot more important in the end.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What was a key moment for you in your career that's kind of shaped your approach to leadership then?
So I think honestly, the big moment is kind of what we're talking about is when I made that change. Because I think for me, I
Yeah.
had always been just stuck in I have to plan so far ahead to understand how my career is going
Mhm.
to go. But I never expected something like that would have happened. That would have completely just changed the track of where I was headed. And I think it was so valuable to realize that as much as you can, I think, have goals, and it's important to plan and understand where you want to head. I think it's also embracing that comfortability that it will always evolve. And I think just staying adaptable has been a really important thing I think I've held closely with me from that experience. And just I've brought it into I think a lot of other things professionally and personally. So it's been cool to see that growth.
Amazing. So I'm just kind of talking through the topic of flexible working. I know it's something that a lot of companies are still talking about to this day, and they're still trying to figure out how to sort of create an inclusive work environment, how to sort of build a culture, within companies. I think it's still a work in progress in my view.
Hmm.
But, what does flexible working mean to you personally? It means a lot of things to different people. So interested to see what you think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I mean, the biggest things are just balancing what is important to me personally, what's important to me and what's important to me professionally. So I really like to travel and have that flexibility. So an
So,
employer that can service those areas is really important. I want to be able to have a little bit more freedom in my schedule and be able to go different places, even working sometimes. I recognize that there's like limitations with like time allotments, and all companies have to strike a balance there. I think
yeah.
global mobility is a really tricky thing that most companies are trying to solve right now. Like, how do they
Mhm.
offer that in a way that is like legally compliant? But to me, I think that's a really big thing. And I think also just a company that fosters a positive work-life balance, because if you don't have that, I think it's really hard to have a flexible environment. Like if you need to, I think the pretty clear one is if you say you need to go do a doctor's appointment in the middle of your day or something like that. Having that to me, I think is a really big sign that my employer is flexible and will stand behind it, no matter what like happens in my life, and will offer me that space if I need it.
Mm, yeah, no, I mean that makes sense. I mean, gosh, I just remember like prior to COVID, like it was so difficult to even just get like a couple of hours off just to go to the doctors, and like I'd
Oh
have to get
yeah.
a doctor's note, get a slip. That doesn't happen anymore. I think if that happens now, it's almost like micromanagement.
Right. Or, I mean, I think another tricky boat that you could fall in is you have companies that say they'll do that, but then I think just then the workload doesn't necessarily reflect that flexibility, which is a
Yeah.
tricky balance to meet as well. I mean, especially with a startup company, right? And you see companies leaning up so they have less employees doing more. But I think to me, if a company can really stand behind that, then they're truly a flexible environment.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, how do you sort of think companies then can balance flexibility with sort of the business needs then? So obviously you talked about workload. How do you think that could
Mhm.
be put around?
Yeah, I mean, I think like from the top, I think having a pulse of what your workforce is feeling and saying is vital. I think if you
Yeah.
don't have that feedback, then you can't really understand what's going on and how you can cater to the needs of the workforce. And I think from there, I think having your people team really closely aligned to just like the company strategy
Yeah.
is vital, because if you don't have that collaboration internally where the business needs and goals can just be managed with what the people are also saying and feeling, I
Mhm.
think then that's when it becomes really challenging to meet those needs. But I think with that synergy and that just like internal collaboration, I think you can help to strike a balance. And then, of course, just like having a pulse of what's going on externally, because things are always changing. There's new laws as we are like going into like new remote work with new things happening. And like I was
Mhm.
mentioning before, like global mobility and all this fun stuff that's popping up. I think it's important to also like understand what's going on externally and how you can how your business can thrive in that environment.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Talking about sort of like the future of work. So I've heard this term quite a few times. Gen Z employees. Explain what that actually means.
Yeah, I think it's just from a new generation entering the workforce.
Yeah.
So I think with that generation has different needs or different wants. And I think for Gen Zers, they're seeing a lot of really I think benefits that people are wanting but are just like they're demanding it. So I think it's like really coming up now that it's just they're coming into the workforce more and more, and I think it's things that we might necessarily not seen offered in the past, so I think that's why it's become a hot topic. And then I think there's of course like many other things happening. There's like crazy political stuff. There's a bunch of major companies forcing 5-day return to office. So I think benefits and flexible working environments has just become a
Yeah.
really big trending thing that's coming up on LinkedIn and all these other social medias.
Yeah. So when we're talking about sort of like Gen Z employees and what they're asking for, so I mean, examples that I
Hmm.
think of is probably even just like paternity leave or even just
Hmm.
grievance leave when your pet has passed away. Are you talking about things
Hmm.
like that, or are we talking even further than that?
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's two like buckets. So there's obviously like benefits, which I think I would categorize as like you're saying, it's um like health insurance and some of those other things under that category. But then there's also like the more perks category. And I think this is
Mhm.
when it gets a little bit more extended. Like that's when there's like the mental health stuff. And I think that could even be seen as a benefit at some points, which I think it should. Um, there's the parental benefits, which I think fall under the benefits as well. Perks, I think that's when you're getting into wellness stipends or upskilling and like internal
Yeah.
mobility. There's like a bunch of things I think that fall into the perks category that that I think Gen Z is maybe where they're demanding a little bit more, but also just amplifying the benefits that the companies offer.
Okay. Makes sense. And then how do you think like what changes do you think you see in the next few years around that then? So
Mhm.
future benefits, what do you think that sort of looks like?
Yeah, I think it's just going to be around that word we've been throwing around. I think it's just flexibility is what
Mm,
I feel like will really evolve. I feel like the employee will have a lot more say in what they are offered, or even just like flexibility in the type of benefits. I think
yeah,
just like say an example is parental leave. I think parental leave, like maybe in the past, was more geared towards mothers for taking that time off, but I
yeah,
think it'll maybe lean more paternal. And as there's different needs and different family styles, different genders entering the ring, I think all of those things will have to continue to evolve. And taking that feedback from your employees, I think, is how you can find that bridge with
hmm
having things that are truly flexible and can cater to the diverse workforce that you're welcoming into your business.
yeah,
Um, I think we can also think about as like AI and all these like crazy technologies are coming up. I feel like there's a tricky balance that people teams will have to find to keep things like still like human centric and of course
hmm
legally compliant, but I think there is a lot of space for more like customization, and it'll be able to have unbiased insights of what's going on with your employee workforce, which I think will be really valuable in the arena of DE&I and initiatives
yeah.
that fall under there and the benefits that are offered there. So run on that one, but I think there's just so much that will change just due to everything that's happening now.
No, I think you made a good point around the AI piece, around like how AI is
Mm-hmm.
going to influence employee development, because again, I think this is an ongoing discussion. A lot of people talking about how AI is going to replace people, but honestly, when it comes to
Right.
things like mental health, when it comes to creating, inclusive environments, and you still need to have that people element, and you just cannot
Mm-hmm.
do it via a robot, right? So
Mm-hmm.
yes, there are ways to, I don't know, maybe simplify like a employee portal, for example, but
Mm-hmm.
actually to really understand and um get a perspective of what everyone wants. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's really hard to just, use AI in doing that alone, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I get the fear. It's like, I mean, it's scary for even like I've seen crazy recruiting technology that's being built with it. So everyone I think
Gosh.
has the right. Everyone has the right to like have these fears, but I do think it'll be really interesting to see how companies like harness it and allow it to really like help their teams like flourish in a different way. So we'll see what happens with it. Maybe it'll take over the world, maybe it won't.
Yeah, maybe. And also,
Yeah.
just another thing, talking around sort of diversity and inclusion, I think again, this is an ongoing thing, and I
Hmm.
still think that we haven't solved the gap. I think we've made
Hmm.
improvements, but I think there's still a gap between, gender biases, the male to
Hmm.
female thing, all of that sort of stuff. How
Hmm.
do you think we can still sort of create that sort of more inclusive work environment, and how are you guys doing on that as well?
Yeah, I think like something specifically we're doing right now, which I think is really great, is with our review process. We have like a performance and compensation review process twice a
Mhm.
year. We use Lattice as the tool for that, and that was newly implemented last year. So it is like a newer thing using that tool, which has been really helpful because we're able to have like more of a 360 approach to our feedback. We have like a manager feedback, and upwards, you do like a self review. Oh, excuse me, upward, and then we have like a peer review. So it's a really holistic approach. So I think from that, there's naturally like more inclusion and promotion decisions and like growth opportunities for our team members.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really big step. We also have built a competency framework so we can really help people to grow across our career framework and just have really clear milestones for it. And just, I think transparency as well is a really
Yeah.
important part of that D&I journey. And the more opportunities you can create for equity and inclusion, the diversity, I think, is kind of a natural piece that will follow from it. And then also just like putting your job opportunities in the right places. I think there's a lot of like new sites and things that are popping up now. So I think those are things we're exploring as well as understanding just where we want to advertise or where we want to source and find talent from. So a lot of things, but I think it's one of those parts of a company that it will be an ongoing journey. It's never like you'll have like, okay, like we solved D&I, like we can check it off our list now. And I think that's been an important learning is like how can we always integrate this into what we're doing?
Yeah, exactly. And talking about sort of sourcing the gender piece, I
Hmm.
have clients of mine like asking me about this as well,
Hmm.
honestly. Um, I really do not think, unless I've missed out, I do not think there is a tool out there that can just, there is one called Seek Out where you can
Hmm.
sort just female, male, but even that, I still
Right.
think you need that people element there because,
Hmm.
someone's name could be a unisex name.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So it's really hard to sort of like pick that out, right?
Hmm.
You still sort of, you still as a recruiter, you still need to be proactive and sort of get on the
Hmm.
phone and figure that one out. And then, the interview still needs to be there. So yeah, just going back to that AI piece, it's difficult to implement those kind of tools with just a tool alone, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's like sourcing is definitely like recruiters have a tricky job in that sense where they're trying to meet that balance where they're diversifying the interview pipeline that they have.
Mhm.
But I think that's why we've tried to implement some things like blind sourcing. LinkedIn has like new features where you can like blind source on their tool. I've played around in the past with, we used to be partners with a company called Mogul, and I believe on there you can sort by gender. I I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure you can. I know that can be controversial as well if you can
Yeah.
sort by gender if you're like kind of apple picking, but I think just having that like blanketed lens where you can't see really who the person is, or even from like the interviewer side, if you have a diverse interview panel, I think that can help with these types of things. And then also I think then like the cherry on top of all that is skills based hiring. So I think if you have a diverse interview panel and you
Mhm.
have maybe more naturally diverse candidates coming in, you can like avoid having gender bias in that process if you're really just basing it on like a specific skill rather than just specific experience or um, your gut feeling or all those things they say for us to avoid now. So those are some ways to mitigate it, but it's definitely, it'll be a balance to see what tools can actually do that without a human.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't know LinkedIn you could do a blinded thing unless I'm missing something.
I think on the recruiter tool. So this wouldn't be like
No,
necessarily to just like a
look.
person, but I'm pretty sure you can block the names out and the pictures is how it works. And that way, like when you're sorting through like the source list or the talent pool, whatever it's called, you can't necessarily tell exactly who the
Right.
person is. You just can see like their experiences.
Interesting. Okay, I'll look into
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
Anyway, so just moving on to sort of the work-life balance, we're going back into that. So,
Hmm.
another important topic in the workplace is supporting mental health.
Hmm.
You talked a bit about transparency, so I also think that there's that as an element in it.
Hmm.
What do you think is the key in supporting mental health and well-being in the workplace and making sure that companies can encourage work-life balance without sacrificing that productivity?
Hmm. I think having conversations about it is a really nice way to like open things up and provide transparency to the company without making people necessarily open up about it if they're not comfortable.
Yeah.
We actually just signed on with Oliva this year. They're a pretty cool like mental health platform, and they offer different workshops that we can host live with our team. And then they also offer just like a platform where our like everyone can explore on their own different
Yeah.
videos and resources and things that can help them along this journey. So I think having that like openness and starting that conversation is a great step. And I think once you can develop trust with your employees and
Mhm.
you have that like hand in hand, I think that's a really big step towards not sacrificing the productivity that your team is
Yeah.
that your team has. While like yes, of course they have the flexibility to go to a doctor's appointment or take a call with their therapist in the middle of the day, but
Mhm.
they're still going to do their work as well because you trust them, so then they're going to trust you. So I think that's where the balance can come. And from my understanding, I mean, I've worked really closely, of course, with a lot of the people teams here, these type of tools are really well received. We get a lot of positive feedback from it, and
Mhm.
we have never seen it affect like the productivity of our teams. It's only like enhanced the connection people feel to the business, and I think
Yeah.
with that, they're more willing and able to show up and yeah, do their best work because of that.
That's really good to hear. Yeah, I think it's really important. It is all about trust as well, and again, like that transparency
Hmm.
piece you mentioned. But last but not least, so talking about sort of sustainability and innovation, then, how
Hmm.
do you think sustainability is important in today's workforce, and what ideas have you sort of seen to make that more creative and more engaging?
Hmm. I think it's an important piece, and I do think with Gen Z, I do think they are very their mindset is catered toward these type of
Yeah,
things. They want to see an employer that offers this. I've seen a lot of different things. Like I've seen companies sponsor like e-bike memberships, or I've seen like a lot of like transport on like
mhm,
what do they call it, like ride sharing or like carpooling, and doing
yeah.
this to like promote people to have different ways of transportation of getting to the office. I actually my old roommate last year, her company did like a walking challenge. So it was like
Okay.
number of steps that each employee got. It just like all went towards a goal, and there was like one person who had the most steps, and I think it was like a month or something they did
Oh,
the time frame. I think that just encouraged people to walk more and maybe
yeah,
drive less. So I think things like that are a little bit more creative. I think it's a balance too, right? Of now that everyone's going back to the office, there's going to be a lot more carbon offset from like transportation and
yeah,
travel and everything that happens with that. So I think there will be hopefully an uptick, or companies will focus on some of these areas. I think a nice step, which we actually did, they've done the past 2 years, is just to track the footprint that everyone has,
yeah.
and just having awareness around like what you're producing, and then maybe like creating policies around it to see how you can like um, mitigate those offsets. So I think those are some of the creative ones I've seen. I'm sure there's many
Mm,
more.
that's
Companies get creative.
yeah, no, that's interesting. Oh, another thing I was going to ask you as well. So, talking about staff, right? As you
Hmm.
know, it's difficult to hire great talent. Although,
Yes.
yes, people are probably saying there's more talent out in the market. I personally
Hmm.
think that a lot of those are being snapped up now, and companies are
Hmm.
starting to hire again. So, I think what's
Hmm.
really important is for companies to really consider how to retain and keep their internal
Hmm.
employees happy.
Hmm.
Um, so, what trends are you sort of seeing in upskilling and internal mobility in companies?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think with upskilling and doing all of these, making all of these advancements to retain people,
Yeah,
I've seen like time off with education days, so people can really just like
like
focus on like taking time to really grow their skill sets, which we actually just implemented, which is really exciting. So I think having that time and space is important. I think also like making the path for them. I think a lot
yeah,
of companies can fall in a place where there's maybe just no growth path available. So really making sure your people teams are dedicated. And I've seen some really cool enhancements there where um, they're doing like job sharing, where you can just part time share
mhm,
roles with someone so you can really learn about a different function, or do like mentorships internally, where you can also just like see what it's like to be in someone's role and understand if it's something that you would want to maybe do in the future. Um, also just like a budget for this
yeah,
as well. Like I think without maybe having to like add to someone's salary, I think that's a really nice bonus to say like, hey, we support your growth journey, and we're going to give you this like space to go choose how you want to learn. And that way the person really has like the freedom to decide like what they want to focus their growth on. And then also maybe giving them support on like um, how they can grow in an effective
mhm,
way, or just give them some guidance around it, I think is where those things can go really hand in hand. So some really cool things there. I think those are
yeah.
some of the things I've seen companies doing.
Yeah, that is really cool. Anyway, it's great to have you on the podcast. Really appreciate your time. Super insightful, exploring the ways around sort of the future of work, remote working, flexibility, and how like employers should really sort of just be mindful around like the culture aspects of, how
Hmm.
employees are treated and these sort of increasing their productivity. So yeah, pleasure to have you on here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Great
Thank
chatting.
you. Thank you.